Thanks, guys. Welcome. So I'm Anthony Monta from the Nanovic Institute, the Associate Director. Welcome to the first feature in the fall film series of European film at Notre Dame. It's really true about Kevin, and it's a delight, of course, to work with Ricky. I've been working with Kevin for a long time, and I remember an episode when projection at Notre Dame was not actually a given. So there was a film with a very famous film director and actress who came here, and not 30 seconds into the film, it started to go dark, and the bulb exploded, and there was this catastrophic event that occurred. And so it was a miracle, actually, because even though we got everybody to the Jordan Auditorium to see a DVD version of the film, this was the straw that broke the camel's back. I won't mention the camel's name, so that we got new projection facilities at the Browning Theater. So this extraordinary technology that we have now is due to this sort of intrepid work of Kevin Krsmanich in the projection booth to advise people on what should be in the projection booth. So please, a round for Kevin as well. And a round for Ricky, who's programming some wonderful films. In addition to the Nanovic films, you should know that next week they are going to screen Lost in Paris, a new film. I think exactly a week from tonight, which is wonderful and funny, so you should come see that. In the Nanovic Institute film series, we have got, coming up next, Stalker, which, if any of you know, is a very famous science fiction film by a Soviet film director named Andrei Tarkovsky. And it was made in 1979, but it has been beautifully restored. And so we will see that in all of its original intended loveliness here. If you are interested in Soviet dissident film, in science fiction, if any of you young people are into such video games as Portal and Portal 2, do you know what I'm talking about? I see, oh, thank God, I saw one guy in a baseball cap who was nodding. Yes, Portal, this great game, dystopian science fiction, wonderful film. If you've read Dostoevsky, come see this film. Then there is The Forgotten Army. That'll be our next feature, directed by Signe Astrup. Signe will be here, scheduled to be here. It is a wonderful film about German soldiers from the GDR who do GDR reenactments, military reenactments in the present day. It's a documentary. It's absolutely fascinating. And then the last film will be Don Quixote, that is Don Quixote, get it? Don Quixote, which is directed by Chico Pereira, who is also scheduled to be here to introduce this film. It's a wonderfully interesting, also quasi-documentary, but more than documentary film about a guy and a donkey in Spain going on a quest. And I urge you to see that. But for tonight, so François Ozon, if you don't know anything about him, he was born a year after me, 1967. So he was a toddler during the student riots in 1968, that crack across history in Paris. He got his start making films in the mid-90s. And his first full-length film, sitcom, came out in 98. And then he made a film that brought him a lot of fame, Huit Femmes. And if you recognize any of the last names of the actresses, Deneuve, Ardant, Huppert, Isabelle Huppert, and Emmanuelle Béard. It was a murder mystery musical melodrama, which you can imagine did very well in France. It was a big commercial and critical success. And after that, he made a slew of more well-regarded films and was asked to be part of the Berlin Film Festival jury in 2011. His film in 2013 won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, so he's a very well-regarded film director in France. In relation to his work as a whole, it's been called the cinema of the body. That's been thrown around. And he's been described as something of an enfant terrible in French filmmaking, which is a sobriquet he finds now at the age of almost 50, like me, sort of amusing. Now, Frantz, which came out last year, is considered very uncharacteristic of Ozon's work, and it got a fair amount of buzz. It was nominated for 3 Césars, a Globe de Cristal for Pierre, who is this fellow right here, It was a spitting image of Robert de Montesquieu. If any of you know Robert de Montesquieu, famous dandy in the late 19th century Paris, there's a very famous portrait. Anyway, can't imagine he wasn't cast with that in mind. And the Louis Deluc Prize, Lumiere Award for Best Screen, et cetera, et cetera. So several of the people involved in the film, the cinematographer won one of the Césars, and the actress who plays Anna in this film, Paula Beer, won the Venice Film Festival's Mastroianni Award for Emerging Actors and Actresses. So this is a very highly regarded film, not as characteristic of Ozon's work, but award-winning nevertheless. So what's helpful to know about it going in? First, the plot comes from a play. It's always sort of marketed, at least in the US, as a remake of an Ernst Lubitsch film called Broken Lullaby, which came out in 1932, and the plot is very similar. But it's actually, the genesis of this film came out of Ozon's reading of this play by Maurice Rostand, who was a friend of Jean Cocteau. So Ozon read the play, he was struck by it, started the screenplay, and then he discovered Lubitsch's film and was totally despondent. Lubitsch did this wonderful adaptation, but Lubitsch's film didn't do very well, commercially or critically. If you know anything about film criticism in the U.S., Pauline Kael was a famous film critic, called it drab, sentimental hokum. But a London reviewer called it a, quote, nakedly sincere ode to the power of sympathy. So opinion was divided about this. And division is interesting to Ozon. The second thing to know is that Ozon sees the adaptation not in terms of a remake of Lubitsch, but a real revision. He changes the focus of the film's perspective to shift it away from the winners of the First World War, the Allied powers, that is, the French character, and more towards the losers of the war, the German side, the German family. And Ozon is particularly proud of what happened because of a shift in this perspective. When he was shown the film in Germany, he said the German audiences have been extremely appreciative that a Frenchman was so interested in their sort of cultural or emotional posture after the war. And so this is something we need to pay attention to in this film. The film also represents a shift in the way it handles the ending. And I'm not going to give any of it away, but I want you to know that it's anything but what Pauline Kael described as sentimental. Ozon was very thoughtful about how to handle this ending, particularly for a modern, what he says is an ending for a modern audience. And the last thing that you need to know before we start to show the film are a few fun details. One, the film was actually shot in color. And it was changed to black and white in the editing room, but not entirely. And so I want you to pay attention to the moments in the film where you start to see some color appear. That's done deliberately, right? It's done for some thoughtful reason, so pay attention to that. Second, Pierre, this fellow, doesn't speak a word of German. He was hearing German in a headpiece, he was thinking about the German words, and he said the German, but he actually doesn't know anything of what he's saying in the film, evidently. But it's a remarkable act of, I think the more precise word is ventriloquation, right? He's not ventriloquisming somebody, but he's ventriloquating German, and it's done superbly well. And last, pay attention to the paintings in the film. There's a reference in the Rostand play to a painting by Gustave Courbet, a famous and somewhat controversial French painter in the late 19th century, but it didn't work quite for this ending. So Ozon has chosen a painting by Edouard Manet, and it's a very interesting painting, very shocking painting, and it has to do, I think, with a shift in one of the characters' perspectives. So pay attention to paintings in the play. In general, this is a film about secrets, lies, half-truths, projections. He plays with what you think you are looking at. And lies, and he said very explicitly that he likes to play with the audience and its expectations. So be aware that you're not meant to just look at this as a period piece. He's actually thinking about your response to this as he's putting this film together. And personally, I think about the film's relationship to Gothic literature, if you know anything about Gothic narrative conventions. This has a lot of Gothic narrative conventions, but it's sometimes a film about how do we escape the Gothic? How do we escape the First World War? But you can come to your own conclusions. I think it's a film for our time, since it explores longing and the necessity for forgiveness and reconciliation in an age where identities and signifiers of all kinds seem to be so elusive, so protean, and so often under divisive suspicions. So I hope you find this as an elegant and an exploration of these themes as we have. Thank you very much. Enjoy the film.